the attendees, you guys are on mute right now. You'll be able to raise your hand either on your application, a Zoom application through the raise hand button, or if you're on the phone, it's *9. You'll also be able to put questions into the Q&A and we will answer those in real time. And if not, we'll try to get to them after the meeting or after the presentations. And that's about that. Any other things I need to touch on, Mike?
No, I think you're good. Thank you. Thank you, Miriam. Once again, super grateful for your assistance on the webinar series. And as a reminder, the webinar is being hosted by a consortium of entities called the La Plata County Economic Recovery Task Force. And I think we'll have enough time at the end of the panelists to hear from our co-chair on stabilization recovery efforts, Mr. Scott Shine. Next slide, Miriam. Since last time we met, PPP monies have come and gone, and now funding is back again, crossing our fingers. And the following is an update as of noon today from our local banks that are still taking PPP applications from existing customers and new applicants. Please do contact your bank as this is subject to change. And for the outlining areas, please reach out to your bank as well. Next slide, Miriam. So full agenda today, a heartfelt thank you to all of our speakers that are giving their time and their expertise to us. So we'll go ahead and get started. We've received just a tremendous amount of support from both of our senators, Gardner and Bennett, in making a big push to get funding. And we've constantly been kept in the loop by both John Whitney and Ann McCoy Harold. So I want to thank them for doing so. To get us started, talking about the new stimulus funding.
Mike, can you hear me okay?
We can.
So during this difficult and challenging time. But before I say anything else or do that, I just want to acknowledge for everything you guys are doing, challenge we face. Our CARES Act, which we covered in detail, for stronger unemployment insurance, and $7 billion in loans, PPP program that's dominated the discussion, utilized most by businesses here. I've talked to many businesses here on the West Slope, and I know it hasn't always been a problem. Anytime you're moving $350 billion, there's certainly going to be wrinkles of feedback that we've gotten on the program with those fixes. But the most important thing is to keep it going. And in that regards, of course, the PPP did run out of money a bit ago. That's a problem that we never really should have had. Senator Bennett, when the bill was being put together, the original CARES Act, he was one of the senators that said we shouldn't even cap the program. We should just let it roll as long as it's needed, or set it to some kind of economic benchmark to say, okay, the program goes away if the economy recovers to a certain extent. But be that as it may, it was capped, and so we do have to replenish the funding. The U.S. Senate a couple days ago did come together to pass a bill that would have more funding for PPP, specifically $310 billion, an additional authority for PPP. We're able to get some small reforms in on the program as well, do some set-asides for smaller lenders and community development financial institutions, CDFIs that we have some here in our corner of the state, of course, which is great. The bill also made it so that farmers and other ag enterprises are eligible for the EIDL program, which is a good change. We also gave $2.1 billion in new funding for staff for SBA to support these programs, because obviously, they've been quite overwhelmed. Additional $60 billion for the EIDL loan, program, which I know isn't as widely used as PPP, but is nevertheless very critical for businesses around here as well. So to talk about some of the changes that Senator Bennett is pushing for on the PPP, one of the things he'd like to do is really see the loan repayment term get a lot longer. In the original CARES Act, it was said that repayment could be up to 10 years. but Treasury went with a repayment term of 2 years. And Michael's really pushing to see if we can get back up to 5 or 7 years for those who don't end up with loan forgiveness. Of course, if you get loan forgiveness, you don't have to worry about that. But I know I've talked to several businesses in Durango who, for varying reasons, do worry that, they're not going to end up with loan forgiveness. They're going to end up with a long-term loan here, and certainly want to do all we can to help those businesses get to lower payments. If you do a 2-year repayment, businesses are going to have, $2,500, $3,500, a month, depending on the business, could be more. So we're pushing on that change. We're also pushing to see that businesses can use PPP funds for more than what they can do right now, to go above using 25% on non-payroll costs where it's capped now. Another change we're pushing for is to make more nonprofits eligible, including 501c6s, which, we've heard from several folks. That I think Jack's on the call, and Mike, La Plata Economic Development. I know several entities around here would like to see that. That's something we're supportive of. Some of these changes, we've also teamed up with Senator Gardner. I think hopefully some of you got an email from me where we sent a letter with Senator Gardner to congressional leadership, joined by Governor, now Governor Polis. I'm used to him being a congressman. But we made a push for a number of changes there. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get most of these changes in the bill that's moving forward this week, but there will be another bill down the road, and we're going to keep fighting for these changes. One, we want to increase the program appropriations and the loan amount to 4 times average monthly payroll for firms that have suffered significant revenue losses. So that's one thing we're pushing for. Also, we want to increase the amount that can be sent on non-payroll expenses. We want to expressly provide that some more healthcare entities, including our critical access hospitals and rural healthcare providers, are eligible to participate in this program. Again, we want to put more nonprofits in, and we also want to provide that businesses can participate in both PPP and EIDL loan, and really make that clear. There's been some confusion and problems on that front. We want to also add some stuff to the list of qualified expenses to make sure mortgage principal payments can be in there in accordance with previously established amortization schedules. And then, of course, we also want to keep setting aside more PPP funding for our smallest businesses. Some of you will have followed the news that some of the largest companies in our country, Shake Shack and others, really took a lot of the money, and that's part of why the funding ran out for this program. And so, the senator is on record making sure that in future legislation we look at setting aside some money specifically for who was intended, which is our smallest businesses, our Main Street businesses in places like Durango. So the next task ahead of us after this bill passes, and it will pass today. There's already been one preliminary voice vote, which it easily prevailed on. They are slowly trudging their way through some parliamentary procedure here this afternoon to move to a formal recorded vote. It doesn't move real fast right now because, unfortunately, they're trying to follow social distancing and only have a limited amount of House members on the floor at any given time. So it might stretch into the evening. I haven't heard the exact final estimate for the final recorded vote, but hopefully before the end of the day, it's expected the president will sign the bill immediately and hopefully into law this evening. And, with that, we can hope that Treasury will reopen the portals on the PPP loans, hopefully first thing in the morning, although I know we'll probably hear from some of our SBA folks on that. Looking ahead to the next really big bill, which we certainly need to do, we certainly need, what folks are referring to as the COVID-4 package, another, big bill along the lines of the CARES Act. And really, one of the things Michael Bennet is focused on in that bill is making sure that we do what we need to do to protect our small businesses in that bill. In this challenging time, we just can't let our small businesses crumble away. And Senator Bennet really believes we need to spend big and aggressively now to stop that from happening. Again, I said earlier, that there shouldn't even be a cap on this at all. Hopefully that's something we can lift, but if not, hopefully we can get a hefty reinfusion for the PPP, because a lot of folks are saying that this money that we're passing, hopefully today through the House, is quite likely to run out again, just like it did from the original CARES Act. I know a lot of banks have a lot of applications poised to go forward. I've heard estimates from, anywhere from, 3 to 7 days that the money might run out. Could be longer, we'll see, but we really need to keep the funding flowing A lot of folks in DC, a lot of congressional leadership have in the last week or so rediscovered their inner deficit hawk and are now kind of saying, hey, what we really need to be worried about is the deficit here. And it's always good to be mindful about the deficit, but at the same time, we need to realize that if we let too many of our small businesses go out of business and go bankrupt, that's something we'll never really recover from, and it'll only lengthen our economic recession or perhaps even depression. So while some are saying, let's hit the pause button on future spending, that certainly isn't Michael's perspective on the PPP and other small business programs. He's going to keep advocating for more money and keep pushing on that as the priority in the days ahead. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, John. And do let us know if during the course of the webinar you get a text.
Will do.
Thank you. Next slide, I'd like to introduce Mary Shepard. When it comes to local resources, I think this is probably the best place to start in terms of some consultative advice. Mary? You're on mute, Mary.
Sorry, unmuted it on my phone, but not on my computer. Hi, I'm Mary Shepard. I'm the Executive Director of the Small Business Development Center here serving the 5 counties and 2 tribes of Southwest Colorado. And for those of you who don't know, we offer no-cost business consulting for small businesses and trainings and workshops as well. Right now, we are absolutely focused on helping businesses get access to the programs that are out there, prepare and apply for these programs. We're also starting to pivot a little into looking at longer strategies. So once you have your PPP or your EIDL, or if you don't get one of those programs, what's your strategy for long-term success? So if that's something that you're working on, feel free to reach out to the SBDC. Just again, for those who don't know, we are one of 15 SBDC centers in the state of Colorado. We are a full network. We are meeting about 3 times a week right now as a state to really leverage all of our programs and all of our experts for everyone across the state. So we do have links below. Take a look at those as far as we're compiling all of these resources, webinars that we've done across the state, so you have access to all of that. And as an SBA program, obviously, we're working very closely with our team of SBA professionals here in Colorado. I'm not going to take a lot of time right now because I think it's much more informative for us to go ahead and let SBA give us their quick overview. So I'm going to go ahead and just introduce Frances Padilla, who is the state director for SBA in the state of Colorado. She's also on this call, and so I think we'll get a lot of great information from her. So welcome, Frances.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mike. And John, I really, really appreciate working with all the congressional delegation, but Senator Bennett's office has certainly been really, really easy and really understanding and flexible. And we've been working really, really closely with your team over the last couple of weeks to answer as many questions as we possibly can from the field office level. And totally, totally love our SBDC network. Without them over the last 2 weeks, I really don't know how we would have covered the broad, expansive information that we've been trying to relay across Colorado to all of our small businesses. We're tiny little field offices. Most SBA district offices have less employees than I do. I'm more of a middle market, but again, without the teamwork of all of you in the field and all of the regional economic development organizations and all of the chambers and all of our congressional delegation, we probably wouldn't have been even as successful as we have been in Colorado. And I know I agree with John, there have been some challenges in the rollout. I mean, it's difficult to think that a small agency like ours, we used to say we're the best kept secret in the federal government, not anymore, just to roll out, 3 million applications into our EIDL program and to administer $349 billion in PPP loans in just, a short 14 days. It's just kind of mind blowing for me, but our work is not done. So what I think I'm going to do today is give you some updates on maybe some other programs that you might not have been aware of and some incentives that SBA has been kind of doing that haven't had the limelight. One of them, a couple of them happened pre-CARES Act. One of them is what we call debt relief. Our first debt relief program actually happened for those that already had an SBA disaster loan not related to COVID. So if anybody in Colorado had a physical disaster loan or some kind of other economic injury loan, could have been associated with fires or anything that happened in the past, and they were still paying on that loan, the administrator made a decision to go ahead and defer those payments automatically for the period of a year. That's already happened. Clients that already had a disaster loan on the books didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to opt in. Their payments were automatically deferred for the period of a year. Another part of disaster loan relief actually happened and was authorized under the CARES Act. So if a client had a loan, whether it was a 7A, an SBA guaranteed loan, so 7A, a community advantage, even an SBA microloan or a 504 loan, then SBA relieved them of the obligations to actually pay the principal, interest, and any associated fees that were owed on those loans. The loans had to be in regular servicing status, so basically in good standing, but we're making those payments on behalf of current SBA borrowers for a 6-month period. So we've just rolled out all of the information probably over the last 10 days to all of the SBA lenders in Colorado who have outstanding clients. And we will be making all the payments starting with the April 30th payment forward for 6 months. So at least it gives a little bit of debt relief to people who already had SBA debt. A couple of frequently asked questions that I get is, if my lender was magnanimous, and a lot of them have been, and prior to this debt relief being in existence, they gave me a deferment, can I still take advantage of the payment, the debt relief payment? And the answer is absolutely. You just need to go back to your lender and let them know that you want to take advantage of the 6 months of payments. If you guys want to discuss after that 6-month period whether or not you should be put back on a deferment, that would be between you and the lender, but it can happen, and we want you to take advantage of us making those payments for you. If you actually made your March payment after March 27th or sometime in the month of April, there is one thing you would have to do as a client. Your lender will let you know that you can either have that payment back, put back into your account or given back to you, or you can opt to have that payment paid towards the principal at the end of all of this. So again, if you made that early April payment, the lender should give you a couple of options. Another update on economic injury disaster loans and economic injury advances. The rapid portal is closed. I think many of you know we've actually gone through 3 different application portals from the very beginning. So when this started, we were on a portal that's an internal kind of server portal. It was never intended to take the volume. Like I said, 3 million applications came through, and it really wasn't intended to take that volume of applications. So probably within the first week, we went with a contractor that's very much almost like a TurboTax or one of those gateways. So in the interim, while we were setting up the rapid system, there was an interim process where clients could download forms and then fill them out and then upload them into a box. So first was the internal server, second was the download and upload version, third was a rapid response portal. Well, in the interim between all of that, the CARES Act was passed, and it actually allowed people to opt in for what we're calling EIDL Advance. So that's basically the emergency grants where you can have up to $10,000 based on the number of employees you have in a grant or a forgivable part as part of your process. So if you were in the first 2 versions of applications submitted to EIDL, you got an email or you got some kind of notification, or you should have, that said, if you want to opt in for EIDL Advance, again, the emergency grant portion, you need to go back into the rapid portal and answer the 4 screens of questions. There was no uploading at that point, and opt in for EIDL Advance. And you still kept your place in line for the actual disaster loan processing part. You just wanted to give yourself the opportunity to get some grant money. So what we're doing now is, like I said, the portal is closed because the funds have lapsed, but they're still processing those EIDL advances and EIDL applications that are in the queue already. So no new applications right now until we have some funding appropriated, but they're still processing those in the queue until they actually do run out of money. I'm now seeing every day clients that are calling me or emailing us in the district office, I'm sure the SBDC is as well, asking questions about the documentation that they're asked to provide or wanting to talk to a loan officer and go back and forth Again, unfortunately, that's a closed system. It's a centralized process. So my staff can't look into that system or check statuses, but we can connect them with a loan officer. Normally, they'll get an email, and the email will say, we're offering you X amount. If you need to talk to someone, there's a 1-800 number or there's an email. That's the best place for them to go to ask questions. I'll make sure that Mary has the information, but just in case, the 1-800 number to the Disaster Customer Service Center is 800-659-2955. Again, 800-659-2955, or they can email disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. That's where we are on EIDL until the portal opens again. If people didn't get to go in and ask for the EIDL advance, once the portal opens, they can go in after and opt in for the EIDL advance as well. On PPP, as John eloquently put it, the funding did lapse. We're waiting for the next appropriation. Absolutely was watching the news right before I got on this, and first vote happened. Waiting for the second part, waiting for the White House to sign. And then my expectation is that the portal would open very quickly. In the interim between the first establishment of PPP and the first round of lenders and everybody that opted in on the lending side, there are actually two ways that lenders can now enter applications. One of them is called Lender Gateway, and the other is our traditional method through eTran, which is just our internal kind of data entry system. So now lenders are set up with two different ways that they can enter applications. So I'm hoping that we don't see the kind of like stalls and starts that we saw when we first rolled this out, because at least in Colorado, we've spent the whole last week talking to almost every lender we possibly could that didn't have access or had problems with access. And we also added 27 new financial institutions in the last 2 weeks that signed up to do PPP lending in Colorado that had previously never worked with SBA or done SBA loans. So we really did make an effort to reach out to every single one of them individually as best we can and make sure that they are set up. So when the portal opens, they can start putting applications in. And I think that's what I have as an update, and I'll stand.
Thank you so much, Frances. Frances and Mary, we're getting a couple of questions in. We'll do the Q&A at the end of the seminar, but if you have a chance to look at those and answer them, please do. Just type in your answer to those individuals. Thank you for your time, Frances. Really appreciate it. Next up, Eric Ike from Alpine. Eric, thank you for being with us, and really appreciate you representing the lending community and giving your perspective from your side of the table.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay, great. Well, first, let me just thank Frances and John Whitney at Senator Bennett's office of trying to help streamline this process. It was rather challenging, and the rules were somewhat being changed as we were negotiating through this process. And, I'm happy to answer any questions people have regarding what banks that have gone through, but it was rather challenging. To put it in perspective, we originated in a 10-day period of time more number of loans than we did in a year. So it was overwhelming. It was great to see a lot of people step up and work in long hours to get those through, to truly get funds into to employers' hands, which hopefully ends up ultimately putting people back to work and putting food on their tables. Certainly support some of the changes that John was referring to. We are very concerned about the forgiveness portion of the PPP loan program. There's some ambiguity in how this gets forgiven. There's some concerns with the calculation and what the borrower ultimately is going to get forgiven, and it could put them in a rather challenging spot. The other thing that I want to talk about or discuss is I know there's a lot of lenders doing a lot of hard work, and the process can seem a little clunky. Please communicate with your bankers. If you're not getting a response, just urge that you continue to try to get through with them or through to them. If that is not the case and you're unable to get to your banker, maybe at that point, then you need to look for other avenues if you're not getting what you want. Ultimately, the goal here is to get money in the hands of employers and get people working again. So whatever that may be, and whoever that may be able to process for you is great. Community bankers across the state of Colorado, as well as the country, did a great job, I think, collectively processing these loans in a very challenging environment that was constantly changing. Again, I don't want to sit up here and preach. I'm open for any questions. Mike, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Mary Frances, do you believe that that there'll be some stronger guidelines regarding forgiveness coming down the line in the next few days?
No, we definitely are expecting that, and it's really funny because when the first interim final rule was published, there's an actual kind of placeholder in that very section right there that says there will be rolling guidance. There will be further guidance specifically on loan forgiveness. This is a little foreign when you have two federal agencies that are sort of working together to administer a program. We've been used to kind of just blowing and going ourselves as SBA. Now we're working with Treasury. So our traditional lenders are used to us issuing policy notices or program guides whenever we have like a pilot program that's rolled out or something that Congress gives us to administer. And now that we have Treasury, that's not what they decided to do. So what they did is they're doing interim final rules, and they post them on Treasury and on SBA, and then they're answering questions in FAQs. So almost every single day, there's a clarification of some kind that's posted both to Treasury and to SBA that kind of clarifies a section, but we're absolutely expecting a whole tranche or at least another interim final rule specifically on guidelines for loan forgiveness.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. I just got a note that I think Leanne has joined us, and she's going to have to jump off. You can only imagine how busy she is. Leanne, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. So if it's okay with everybody, we're gonna put Leanne in and let her jump back to her day. Leanne, I'm sure there's a lot of questions about what's going to happen come Monday.
Yes.
I know you've been just inundated with questions and lots of folks asking you for some guidance. Do you want to go ahead and tell us what San Juan Basin Public Health is giving as guidance to the business community?
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity. Sorry to mess with the schedule a little bit. I very much appreciate you all reaching out, and it was great that you were scheduled and I could jump on, and I'm sorry for not having slides or disrupting the schedule. But what we can say is that, with global pandemics, things are fast moving targets, and we don't always have the same style of preparation for what challenges we're working through as we would like to have. So I believe that everyone here, and since I missed the beginning of the meeting and I don't know where you're headed, I'm just going to jump in with what I believe you guys want to hear from me, which is the transition from stay at home to safer at home. Is that correct? Okay. So,
yes, please.
Okay. So the governor announced on Monday that stay at home would start transitioning to safer at home on April 27th, which is a Monday, so it was 1 week's notice. And then on Wednesday, he gave a subsequent press conference that clarified some of what this transition would look like. So I think between Monday and Wednesday, a lot of information went out around the headline, which is we're transitioning to safer at home April 27th. And some of the detail was not available or was difficult to get out ahead of the headline. So the transition from stay at home to safer at home is a really slow, phased, careful transition to prevent spread of infection in communities. So the only thing that's happening on April 27th is retail can do curbside pickup sales in communities, and real estate can do one-on-one showings, but not open houses. So those are the only two changes for April 27th. There is no other business that is transitioning from an essential, non-essential business to an essential business on April 27th. There are no other changes planned in the state of Colorado on the first day. The other thing that's happening on April 27th is that is the day we expect to get guidance for the subsequent changes that can be implemented on May 1st and May 4th. So to be clear, what's happening on April 27th is two businesses can make small modifications to business practices, and we will get additional guidance for other businesses that are expecting changes May 1st or May 4th. And I'm saying that those are potential changes May 1st and May 4th because number one, we haven't seen the guidance yet of what that looks like for those businesses. And number two, when that guidance goes out, we do not as a community have to uptake that guidance. It's just the opening salvo in that transition. So does that make sense? And is that different than what people understand about what's happening? It's really hard on Zoom when you can't see enough people to see if we're headed in the right direction. So is this the information you guys were looking for today? Is this information that everybody has, or is this a slight different version of it?
I think that's super helpful. So Leanne, if you can fast forward to May 4th, May 15th, what are the mile markers then that everybody should expect after Safer at Home come Monday? Or is that just still TBD?
It's TBD because we're not even getting, I may have misspoke on real estate. Real estate may not be, showings may not be available till May 1st. I just realized I said that one wrong. So May 27th, I have two pieces of information in front of me. But anyway, so the first marker is Monday next week. The next marker is potentially Friday next week. And then the next marker after that is potentially Monday, right? So Monday next week, the 27th, is the first time that we will have guidance to review and then push that guidance out to different business sectors. And the issue is that when we see that there's a kind of a bifurcated process when we receive that guidance. One is we can look at that guidance and say, this is not appropriate for this community. We're not here yet, from a public health perspective, and we can talk about what we need from a public health perspective to open safely. We're getting lots of questions from businesses ranging from, yes, I want to open, to no, I don't want to do this without the right guidance because I'm afraid of hurting people. So, we've gotten quite a few people sending us, we're running the gamut of the feedback we're getting. But the bottom line is, until we see the guidance, we can't even really assess if it's appropriate for our community. And then the next piece of it is, one of our huge fears is when we get the guidance in, it won't be tenable for many businesses in each individual sector. So if personal services, for example, requires medical grade masks, and that's the guidance we receive on Monday, April 27th, and personal services are intending to open on Friday, May 1st or Monday, May 4th, we don't know how a personal service would acquire medical grade masks. So those are the types of guidances that we're waiting for coming down the pipeline that we haven't even had a chance to review, to think through, okay, how does this look on the ground in our community? So the guidance, some of it has to do with things that are achievable. It is making sure that you have access to running water in your business, that your staff can wash their hands frequently, that we give people, adequate breaks during their workday to wash their hands, use hand sanitizer, that we have face coverings, that we stay 6 feet apart from each other, that we understand how many people can be in a business space or in a workplace safely when we're not spreading droplets. So that's some of the stuff that feels achievable, but some of the guidance has things to do with equipment that businesses may or may not have procured, wouldn't know if they need to procure, like medical grade masks or infrared thermometers. And then lastly, some of it has to do for workplaces, can be things as different as knowing what your HVAC air exchanges per, somebody help me out here, per hour, per day is. So I certainly don't know what my HVAC air exchanges are. And so in order for me to bring my staff back to work, that's a piece I'm going to have to research if these things are included in the guidance. So I don't know if this is helpful at all, but I really want to just kind of level set. Until we see that guidance, it's really hard to come on this phone call and say, here's what's going to happen. So I apologize. I wish, I mean, we're as anxious as anybody. This is creating untold damage in our community. It is hurting all of us. We're in the same boat. My family went from 3 incomes to 1 in the last couple of weeks. So I cannot say how much we want to figure out how this is going to work, but we don't have enough information.
Thank you, Leanne. If as much time as you have, glance over the Q&A, and if there's any questions that
Yes.
Anybody has for Leanne while we have her, please type them into Q&A, and she potentially can address those. Okay, Leanne, thank you again. Really appreciate your time and your guidance, and we'll continue to look forward to your guidance as more information becomes available.
Okay, thanks you all for the opportunity. People know where to find us. We have a website that has information. We will post things as soon as we get them. We will be working across the community to make sure that people understand that this is a slow process, and it is a slow process because it is important that we get it right. And thank you so much for for a chance to talk about it. And I will let everyone get back to what you all were doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if you do have questions for Leanne, please type them in, and we'll ask Leanne to give us some answers virtually over Zoom if possible. Our next panelist is Mr. Brad Tafoya. Brad, I know you've had a ton of questions from your clients, other people asking about how to manage forgiveness from the accounting side and what kind of tax liabilities, tax consequences are in place. If you'd walk us through what you know, realizing that some of this guidance is still being developed.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So I want to echo Eric's concerns about our about forgiveness and how this is going to work. And I'm glad that both Francis and John are on the phone call. I'm going to start, I'm going to try to help people understand why this is so difficult with maybe a little bit of an image. I think Mike Burns at Alpine Bank first said this. This whole process of these loans is like trying to push an elephant through a garden hose. The elephant doesn't want to go, and he's trying to digest tax law and banking law along the way. There's kinks in the hose that represent additional guidance. And so that's what we're dealing with here. And I know there's a lot of frustration out there that there aren't clear answers to these questions, but that's kind of the image that I have in my mind every time I think about this. So next slide, please. And so the main guidance that we have, and I think Francis mentioned this, is the SBA internal final rule that was dated April 2nd of 2020. And then some frequently asked questions that were put out on April 3rd. Again, right in there under subsection O of section 2, the SBA says that they will issue additional guidance on loan forgiveness. And again, that came out on April 2nd, and we still don't have that guidance. So there are many questions and confusion remain. One thing I do want to point out that is clear, though, that I'm not sure that people have heard, is that unauthorized use of these funds causes a repayment and possible fraud. That is also in the IFR. So it's very important that folks are using these funds for the qualified costs and know how to do that. So what's important is you talk to your CPA and your banker, and you get their interpretation of how this all works. We heard clients had started receiving funding on right around April 8th, and we didn't have the guidance then that we were looking for. And so my team here at Tafoya Barrett and I put together kind of our best recommendations on what forgiveness might look like, even though we don't have that clarity, just to try and help our clients and set them up as well as we could to use these funds correctly. I did want to note that there is a new FAQ on the Treasury's guidance, question 31, that has to do, I think, with some of the bigger companies taking this money. And I think people need to think about this and make sure that they really need this, that they meet the economic need tests that are stated by the SBA, and that they carefully review the required certifications that are a part of that guidance. And so that was just added this morning. Question number 31. Next slide, please. So really, our best practices starts with, and I think this was mentioned earlier, and I'm going to zoom through this. I included my email address on the slide deck, and also our web page where we go through an email that we sent to clients, updating them on our best practices for loan forgiveness. It has a lot more detail, so people can refer to that if they want to. But I know we're short on time here, so I'm just going to quickly roll through this. We suggest opening a new account to receive these funds. And anytime that you have a qualified cost, a qualified expense that can be used for these funds, either you have checks that come directly out of that account, or you transfer money to your operating account or your payroll account, so that it's clear that the money is being used for one of these qualified expenses. One of the things that is critical is that once somebody gets these funds, once the loan origination date has been set, you have 8 weeks to use the funds on those qualified costs. And that clock starts ticking pretty quickly. And again, we're hoping that maybe there'll be some clarification and a little bit of expansion on that time frame. But as of today, it's still the 8 weeks. So what are the qualified expenses? Qualified expenses to be able to meet the forgiveness are very similar to the qualified expenses that you were able to apply and get loan proceeds for. So again, it includes payroll costs, interest, rent, and utilities. It's important to note that, again, based on the guidance we have now, that at least 75% of the funds should be used on payroll costs. Remember, it's the payroll protection program. What Congress is really trying to do here is protect those paychecks. And so there's a lot of discussion in the IFR about why they have that 75% in there, but it's critical to keep an eye on that and make sure that at least 75% is payroll costs. Again, setting up a separate file as you go along and keeping copies of payroll reports, invoices, leases related to your rent, utility bills, canceled checks, those sorts of things. Keeping a separate file, probably maybe even in a digital format, so that when that 8 weeks is up, you have all of that information ready. I saw a question earlier, how is the forgiveness going to happen? Well, once you've used the funds, once you've passed that 8 weeks, then you actually apply to your banker and ask them that you want the loans forgiven, and you have to supply this information. We believe that there will be an application based on the guidance that we have that will allow people to do that, but we haven't seen it yet. Next slide. I'm not going to go into the payroll costs a lot because we've got it here, and I know we're short on time. But again, essentially, it's the same payroll costs that were used to determine the amount of loan that you could get. So gross salaries, wages, vacation pay, health insurance premiums, retirement contributions. Last Tuesday, we got some clarification on how self-employed and independent contractors can apply for these PPP loans. In simple terms, it's line 31 of your Schedule C, which is net profit on Schedule C. And it looks like they're going to be requiring a 2019 Schedule C for those folks to be able to back up that amount. It also clarified an IFR last Tuesday that partners in a partnership would be using self-employment income. And so it's not just any partnership that has income, it's a partnership that has to have self-employment income and or guaranteed payments. So again, that's a quick coverage of payroll costs. Next slide, please. So this is a big one, and I think this is one, you see all the question marks here, where we really need some additional guidance. Again, the purpose of this is to bring people back on payroll and maintain those payrolls. And so there is some guidance in there that you more or less have to, during the time period of the 8 weeks, you more or less have to have the same FTEs as you did during another period. And I've listed those here. The periods that are in the guidance right now are from February 5th, 2019 to June 30th of 2019, or January 1st, 2020 to February 29th of 2020. You compare the 8 weeks to one of those two periods and you get to choose. And if you have a reduction in FTEs, then part of your loan may not be forgiven. It's not an all or nothing thing. It's just part of it. Same thing, they want you to maintain the payroll. And so there's some language in there that is really obtuse and hard to understand. Again, our quick analysis of it, or simple analysis of it, is that if you pay people at least 75% of what you were paying them before, then you should meet the forgiveness test. But again, we need some real clarity in that area. And again, assuming that you meet all of the guidance that we have currently and the guidance yet to come, then the loan will be forgiven. Again, we think there's a process and an application that the bankers will be given to help with this. And as long as you meet all of that, the loan will be forgiven. And the good news is that loan forgiveness will not be taxed. Typically, when you have loan forgiveness, it becomes taxable income. But with these PPP loans specifically, any loan forgiveness will not be taxable income. There are some other questions out there that need to be answered about whether the related expenses will be able to be deducted. But again, hopefully that guidance will come soon. Next slide. Yeah. And so that's just, I have to put that in there. My attorneys and my insurance providers make me put that in there. Suffice it to say, it's been a great program, but there is a lot of clarity that is still needed. And my team and I are working daily on trying to figure that out and help clients and help the community, as I know a lot of other CPAs and bankers out there are working hard on this. So thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, there was a question I saw. I think it got answered via written response, but the question was, in terms of number of employees, they don't have to be the same employees, just the same number. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, I believe that
and
is.
then one other question.
Go ahead. I had a follow on to that too, Brad. I had a client ask if they were just, the two of them co-owners, but then they wanted to hire someone. Can they have more FTE if they could figure out how to spread that money across more people than what they originally had? Is that allowable?
I believe so. Again, it's not clear, but we believe so. Yes.
And Brad, one other question real quick, and then we'll get on to you, Mr. Malone. On the 75%, that's 75% of what's spent on the loan. So if you're not planning to spend the entire loan, it's not 75% of the total, it's 75% of what you are spending. In other words, if you're going to pay back a portion of it, it's a percentage, not total. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you're asking, but if somebody gets a loan of $100,000, at least 75% of that should be used on payroll costs, which again is gross compensation, retirement benefits, health insurance premiums. The rest then can be used on rent and utilities and mortgage interest payments for mortgages that existed before, I think, February 25th. As long as they do that, then again, they'll meet that forgiveness test.
Got it. I think the question was, if let's say they got a $100K loan and they only plan to spend $75,000 of it, it's still 75% of $75,000, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric, a lot happened this week in terms of unemployment for 1099 gig workers. I know you don't represent the state of Colorado, but you know a lot more about unemployment than a majority of us do. So if you don't mind covering some of that, that'd be a lot of help. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And I'll be concise here, and because I know there's not much time, and I do want to. There's other information in some of the slides I might not cover, but might be a good reference for employers. So let's jump on to the next slide, Mike. So for those who have employees who are eligible, we again very much recommend those employees get in and apply for unemployment. And if you as an employer have not yet signed up for the SIDES program, there's a link to that. And that's that first link under for businesses. That's going to help expedite your claims to your employees when they're eligible. And let's go to the next slide. So yeah, so the big news this week is this pandemic unemployment assistance. So that's where the feds have come in and given the state money. So people who traditionally cannot or would not be able to or have paid into the unemployment program as a W-2 employee, there's funds now available for self-employed, people who are Schedule C filers. People only get 1099s. And even other organizations, there's some nonprofits and churches who, because of their size or their status, don't pay into unemployment. Now those benefits are available for those employees who have traditionally not applied. And then there's some other provisions for COVID-related lack of work. There's been so much work on the Department of Labor site, and this link here will give you a lot of those details. If you are someone in this place where you're not employed traditionally by an employer, but fit this, you can go onto that site and apply and get those benefits. And right now they want your 2019 return because obviously you don't have a W-2 necessarily, you aren't a W-2 employee, but they'll also accept the 2018. The site also they hosted a great town hall on Monday, asking a lot of good just general questions that are more in that gray zone, and they did a pretty good job of it. So there's a link to that town hall that they hosted, as well as just really good details around how to get there. The other big piece that was, I believe, from what I understand, will start this week is the additional $600 a week in addition to the benefits that someone already would get. And that applies under this PUA as we understand it as well. And there's nothing you need to do. Our understanding is that there's an additional $600 a week showing up on your unemployment check. So that's going to be a great benefit for some who are currently out of work. Let's jump to the next slide, Mike. And I've got just another, if you haven't been in some of the previous webinars, again, this is what we're dealing with a lot at the payroll department here, and helping our employees or helping our clients and their employees get the paid sick leave provisions as outlined under FFCRA. And real quickly, you've been subject to state or fed or local quarantine. You're waiting a diagnosis. And also, if you're caring for someone in the above situation, or if you have a child whose school or place of care is closed, there's opportunities to see pay, and that any pay under that is automatically credited against your 941 payment. So that's you're going to be able to pay your employees for these reasons and have an automatic credit on your 941. So that's a pretty significant thing if they fit this. And there's these 4 little links here will give you the details. In that first one, there's actually a poster you're required to put up in your workplace. So if you haven't hit that yet, I'd take advantage of that and get that posted. Next slide. And some of the things Eric brought up, that Brad brought up, the PPP, we're waiting on all kinds of guidance, because what we're helping with is getting you the reports you need to, at the front end, apply for those loans. But also when it comes forgiveness time, we know everyone's going to be counting on us to provide those payroll reports. So we're looking for that same detail. We are not sure if it's days worked or check date, kind of that cash accrual question. We're looking for that, and every day we're trying to get that guidance to help our employers. But those funds are starting to show up, and we're advocating that folks spend that on payroll right away. And for those who aren't necessarily eligible for the PPP, there are a couple other tax provisions. The employee retention credit, where up to half the wages can be paid up to 10 grand if you meet those other 3 bullet points there. Your gross receipts are down, there's been a government ordered shutdown, and you haven't applied for a PPP. So that's an alternative provision. And there's also currently a deferral of employer Social Security taxes. And again, that's just a deferment of when those taxes are due. So that employer Social Security, that 6.2% you pay, can be deferred over the next 2 years. So that's a piece of support for folks as well. And if you are a recipient of the PPP, I think a challenge that, if you haven't thought about this, or you're about to get those funds or apply for those funds, a challenge we're all facing right now is because of that $600 additional unemployment, weekly unemployment pay. if you can bring your employees back on payroll, they're going to be challenged to want to get off unemployment, because right now they're making a lot more on unemployment than they might be making with you as their employer. So that question is flooding in right now to us, is that now I'm having to ask my employees to get off unemployment. They're making more money on unemployment, but I need to spend this money in the PPP. So as a business owner and someone applying for that, please take a good look at what that might mean for your business, and advice with your banker and CPA. So that's probably one of the more critical items we see right now facing employers who have employees who are on unemployment and they've received PPP funds. Next slide, Mike. I think that might have been all I had. I wanted to leave it more open for questions. Yeah, so our contact info is there, phones. We're here for our clients, and even if you're not a client, if there's something you think we can be of assistance with, we're here to really just support and help the community through that.
Eric, really appreciate your assistance. There's been a couple of questions that, if you don't mind taking offline in the queue, some of them are specific. You may be able to answer them, or at least direct them to a source.
By all means, yeah, I'll go through those. I know in one,
Okay.
the 600 week being retroactive, we understand that it is back to March. So, but I'll go through those. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Shine, are you still with us? Excellent.
Hi, Mike. Thank you. Thanks for all the speakers and the great information. My name is Scott Shine. I work in the Community Development Department with the City of Durango, and I'm fortunate to be a member of the Economic Recovery Task Force that's meeting. And the focus of this webinar has been how people in our community can access and maximize federal resources, and that's been a big thing that we've been tracking and trying to disseminate information on. But this group is also working very hard to build on and tap into the assets that our community has. And that's really the main message I want to give to the attendees of the webinar today, the business owners and community members in Southwest Colorado and La Plata County. This group is over 30 individuals. We represent over 24 different organizations, including local government, local business owners are on that group, nonprofits, business support organizations are all working together really hard and collaborating on how we can weather this storm and come out of it stronger. We obviously don't have a lot of time and there's a lot of questions, so I would primarily point you to the website that's up on the screen there, Southwest Colorado Disaster Assistance. This is something that was launched back when we were going through the 416 fire, and a number of community organizations jumped on this quickly, relaunched this website, and for over 6 weeks now, this group has been meeting 2 or 3 times a week to, like I said, disseminate information on programs to help local business owners, also develop sort of unique programs for those business owners. So if you go to this website, there's a bunch of resources there that business owners can use in the meantime to try and build their capacity and bounce back stronger as we move into stabilization and recovery. So that's really the main message. Know that there's a broad-based effort at work, and we're setting up also through this website ways for the business community members to be involved, to provide input and suggestions on the work of this task force. So I would bookmark this website, and we have a lot of initiatives coming out related to local policy changes that can aid in economic recovery. And how do we sync up our economic response with this really complicated, dynamic public health world that you heard Leanne talk about? And that's really the intersection that we're working in and trying to navigate for the good of the entire community. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but a lot of information on the SWCOTA.org website. And again, appreciate all the good information from the speakers today.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for your leadership in the task force. As I get to sit in on those meetings and really impressed with what that whole organization is doing in terms of aligning, trying to facilitate information, enable the business community by sector even, to be in lockstep with some of the reopening strategies that Leanne is developing. So really, really appreciate you and your leadership. With that said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, but we're going to still take some questions. I'll pick out a few questions, and panelists, if you're still online, can answer them or answer them offline as you type in the answers. One of the questions that keeps coming up, and Mary or Francis, you might be able to address this, is how does an organization that is not able to open up pay their employees if they can't bring them back yet, and satisfy the forgiveness requirements for the PPP?
That's actually a great question. Mary can jump in if she wants. This is Francis, and I don't mean to be glib by this, but the rules in the program don't specifically speak to any requirement that your employees have to work on anything specifically or a number of hours per week or whatever, but it's really your decision. If you want to rehire them and take advantage of the loan forgiveness for that 8-week program, you can do that and extend benefits to them as opposed to the employees taking unemployment. So it's almost like an offset to unemployment.
Hey, Francis, I don't know if you can even speak to this, but that implies that we know that the employee is not going to be taking unemployment at the same time. Is the business liable in any way if the employee continues to collect unemployment while they're being paid, or is that on the employee?
I mean, the answer to that question is it's basically self-policing, but I would think that the business owner would want to be asking those questions because absolutely there's an expectation that you wouldn't be able to double dip.
Thank you. Eric, maybe you can address this. If somebody applied for UE prior to the opening this week, do they reapply for the new UE, or how do they take advantage of what transpired?
My understanding is that the new PUE, it only started Monday. So if they applied as an independent contractor, self-employed prior to that, I don't believe it was even open until Monday. So if they did, I would suggest go in under the guidance that's there on the website, applying as an independent contractor or self-employed. I would suggest they go in there just to make sure and double check that, because it was Monday that became available.
Thank you.
If you go to the state's unemployment website, it actually has guidance on that. I looked at it today. There is a person with a hand up, so I'm going to allow them to talk and ask her question. Go ahead, Alex.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I had a couple questions, and again, thanks for everybody's time. This is probably for Francis or even John. One is we originally applied for the EIDL loan back in mid-March, and heard nothing other than getting a number. Reapplied as new applications came online, and the status quo remains with only having a number. But my question really is maybe more for John, but possibly Francis again, is there any thought to Congress or to the SBA passing the EIDL loan along to the banks rather than trying to process millions of applications themselves? Otherwise,
I haven't heard.
Even in a normal world, we're looking at a 4 to 6 month time frame, and what SBA has described in the past as a perfect world. I can't imagine what that time frame is now, and that's going to be a little late for folks.
I haven't heard that idea suggested yet, but happy to engage with you on it. Maybe we can take the conversation offline and talk about it. I think there might be some challenges with that route.
Oh, I'm sure.
But
I'm curious if there's any thought.
Yeah, not that I've heard, but again, happy to engage on it.
Alex, did you have a second question?
Yeah, I'm going back to my notes. They were back really came up with John. Sorry. If there's the expansion or a change, this is again for John, in the CARES Act or the next act to an expansion to the funds availability down the road. I know, will you be able to, allows for a larger application than the original rules. Will you be able to reapply? So we've already received a PPP loan, but will we be able to reapply if, for instance, the 4 times payroll rule comes into effect, or there's a change along those lines?
You know, that could be something Congress could look at if we do extend the program, say, beyond the original 8 weeks and make it larger. You know, we could look at changes to that provision. I think this bill that we went through here, which by the way still hasn't passed, I've been checking through the call. They're on a vote on another procedural matter on a related bill, so it might be a while longer. But you know, this bill we just did was kind of an interim bill. Sometimes people called it the CARES Act 2.0 or the coronavirus 3.5 bill. There's all these confusing names for it, but it was more about just kind of making some, you know, additional allocations of money, refilling some accounts, but not a lot of like tinkering with the programs, just a few things. But everyone anticipates for the big COVID-4 bill, as most folks call it, that's where we'll really, you know, get into a more formal legislative process. The majority leader has already said the full Senate's going to have to convene to consider it. It's not going to be just passed like unanimous consent like the bill was this week. And so that's where, you know, changes like that could come. And again, I'd be happy to talk offline about more of those ideas and get you in touch with some of our business policy staffers in DC as needed as well, Alex.
Thank you, John. As always, I appreciate your efforts.
Okay. Miriam, are you seeing any questions that we missed? Looks like a lot of them got answered.
Can I just put something out there? So that it seems like
Yes,
there's
Mary.
repetitive questions about what if people don't want to come back to work? And it seems like we did see good practice on if you received a PPP and you set those up in a separate account and you're doing your best to pay your employees. If there's a fraction of that in the end you weren't able to spend because you couldn't make employees come back, you know, and that part's not forgivable. Hopefully you still have that in your account and you can pay that money back versus keeping it as a loan. So I think it's just really about managing the money that you do spend and making sure you're staying within the guidelines on that part of the money. You know, if you're being careful, you should still have leftover money that if it's not forgivable, you could pay back. There's no prepayment on those.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, for those left on the call, thank you for joining us. Panelists, again, extreme gratitude for your time and expertise. And we'll probably schedule another webinar as we get more information. I'm sure that as we start reopening, that there's going to be a lot of questions around that. And forgiveness is probably still going to get some guidance that we're probably going to need to revisit. So thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, Mike, I'm going to stay on for just a minute and copy some things so we get a document.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miriam,
Thanks.
for letting us do all this. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We had, just so you know, we had about 128, 130 people on this call today. That was the number I saw. So
How many?
about 130, I think was the top
Okay,
number.
good.
So
I sent you an email. Are you able to pull down attendee lists on these?
I will go see what I can do on the backside because
Okay. If you
yeah.
can, we just are going to put it into notes on these in our system so that we're tracking kind of just the 3 that I was a part of, these 3 that we did with you.
So the first one had about 450.
Okay.
And then I think the second one that we had was in the 270, just shy of 3. So,
Yep. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So if that helps at all,
All right.
your notes.
Yeah. Yeah. Just if you have the ability on those 3, if you still have the data on it, if you could just shoot me whatever little report things that I could tag on there, that'd be awesome if you have time.
Yeah, I've got some analytics in the backside of Zoom that I can go poke at,
Perfect.
and I will go do that after this. I'm going to copy all these
Yeah,
questions
no hurry.
so that way we can get the
I'm
document
so
out.
far behind on my reporting that don't worry, but thank you. And
Yeah.
send me any questions that didn't get answered that you need help with.
Okay, will do.
So, all right. Thanks
Have a
again.
good one. Bye-bye.
If I end the meeting, will it shut you out?
I think so. I'm almost done copying.
I have nowhere to be. I can go on another screen, no worry.
I think we're good.
Are you talking to me?
Yep, you can. I'm going to leave the meeting so you can end it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, bye.
Bye.